everybody. David Kennedy, Canopy Realtor Association MLS president, here with yet another ordinary realtor who has done some extraordinary things. Hi.
Hey, David.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you today?
I'm doing just fine.
I'm so glad to see someone in person.
Yeah, how about that? How about that? So today when you say so glad to see somebody in person, that means you're probably inundated with Zoom calls and Zoom meetings. Is that what does Zoom consume your daily life today?
Yeah, I don't know who's Zooming who anymore.
So today in 2021, it is one Zoom meeting after another. Take it back to when you first got into real estate. When was that, and what was life like back then?
1995, 3-page contract, carbon paper, press hard.
Press hard. There's 3 copies. Yeah, got it. Got it. So 3-page contract.
3-page contract.
Wow. And now we're up to a book.
A book.
Listing book.
A listing book and a very basic MLS that ran on DOS. It was called Boris. Boris.
How did Boris come about?
Oh, Boris was something that was developed by a previous CEO who thought that they could sell it to other associations. It just didn't work. Boris went away.
Okay. So you kind of got into the real estate field in the mid to late 90s, where we saw the end of the MLS books, those listing books, and the beginning of the internet. Did you get involved in the leadership at that point? Were you involved with kind of the phasing out of the listing books, or was you just kind of a general practitioner then and looking on the outside looking in?
Back then I was pretty much a general practitioner, volunteering on a base level, like Christmas parties, things like that, but not in leadership for a while.
When did you first start getting in heavy on some of the committees where you knew at some point you were going to get involved in like the executive level of leadership?
Let me think. Well, I went from the smaller committees to the MLS Advisory Board, to the Education Advisory Board, to, it's so many, I think. Most of the committees we have, I've been on.
What was the big issue that you tackled on MLS Advisory?
Back then, there wasn't really, basically on MLS Advisory, what we were just tackling back then was what kind of systems we were going to go with and where the MLS was going to go.
And you had just kind of had a task force in the early 90s that kind of helped with the governance of the MLS.
I was on the first MLS board when the MLS separated from the big association board, and so I was on the first MLS board. So basically what we did at the MLS board was just figuring out who we were, what we do, and how we run the MLS.
Wow. So the very first independent, separate, in its own entity, MLS board.
Right.
Nice.
Yes, and David Barnhart was our leader at that point in time.
So when did you begin serving on the executive committee?
I ran for treasurer and I lost my first run. And so I was with Coldwell Banker Flowhouse at the time. They're not here anymore. And I think the owners just felt sorry for me. And so, and so they appointed me as the large company representative at that point in time. So that's how I got there. It was a pity position.
Surely not. So did you run again or for treasurer, or did you put your hat in the ring for president?
No, I ran then after I served on the MLS board. Then I served on the association board. I was elected to the association board. From the association board, I ran for treasurer.
All right.
I ran against Kinbaum.
Okay. So that's why you guys still have the back and forth to this day.
Yes.
Wow, I see how far it goes back. All right.
And then I ran for president after treasurer.
So you beat Kinbaum.
Yeah.
Yes, for the record.
I beat Remsen too.
Heck yeah. Wow. So now, and you get in as treasurer on the local level. At what year was that? Were you elected treasurer?
I think it was 8.
08. All right. And so in 08 and 09, some of the things coming down the pipe were under Dot Munson. It was her second year. A lot of it was diversity. What was some of the conversations like when it comes to when it came to diversity? What was some of the things you were kind of looking to set us up with there?
Well, we were not very diverse at the time, and I think you still look at a room and we are more diverse than we were, but we could be a little bit more diverse. So it was basically involving people from underrepresented groups to encourage them to become part of the association. So setting up individual councils, an Asian American council, an African American council, and those kind of groups in order to identify leadership that could move on into the association, the MLS, and other leadership positions.
So it's almost as if we had established a leadership academy or a leadership development program in 1999, and then just a few short years later, we say we've got to make sure we're getting everybody's perspective to the table,
exactly.
And it would expand.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. And then you're there in the midst of the Great Recession, where, in your words, it was like the movie Thelma and Louise.
We
drove right off a cliff. What was that like when you were in there?
It was just like, stop. Everything just stopped. It was just stunning, absolutely stunning, and all we could do during those years was just hold steady. We didn't have the opportunity that we had money to spend or things to do or ways to advance. We were just holding on tight, thinking about whether or not we should sell the building. That's when we started the Greenwood Cliff Task Force back then.
That's a big discussion point, particularly considering where we are today. So from my perspective, and I try to insert myself into this, but from my perspective, I always thought about you specifically during some very lean times and some of the choices, hard choices you had to make to hold the line financially,
yes.
And make sure we were still in good shape. What kind of decisions were going through your mind? What kind of things were you doing? And could you imagine that some of the shrewd financial moves that you were making to kind of hold things together would turn into, a $28 million brand new building?
Well, I think you should call my husband, because he would tell you that I'd never make a shrewd financial move. But I think the biggest decision we had to make, because things were tight, and when we knocked down the building in front and developers saw us knocking down the building, they came knocking on our door, offering to buy the land and offering to buy the building.
And this was when you guys were tightening the reins.
That's when we were tightening the reins.
They were holding your money out,
offering
you when you really needed
right.
it. Okay.
And that's when we created the Greenwood Cliff Task Force.
Okay.
And Joe was the first chair of the Greenwood Cliff Task Force. So we had some, for the time, considering we were holding the reins and we could have used the money, we had some offers on the table that we actually just had to sit back and think about and say, it's not the time, even though we could have used the money. It's just not the time.
So, in one of the more difficult financial times, the Great Recession, we as an association have assets. We have offers on the table, and under your leadership, your group had the foresight to tighten up within the ranks as opposed to selling our assets so that one day we could capitalize.
Exactly. It was a hard decision.
You'd have more offers, or you have an offer on the table to sell, and you just wanted to make sure you were approaching our assets and the management of our assets for that which was what was best for our association as a whole, and not just a reaction to the current market we were in?
We always try to make those decisions based on what's good for the association as a whole. But at that point in time, we did entertain a few offers, I think 3 or 4, and we looked at them. We were tempted. We were tempted. But we just said, we've got a bigger dream. We've got a bigger vision. We're just going to sit on this. We'll do what we need to do to get through this. And you don't know how proud I am every time I walk in this building. You should be.
You should be. Did you do the selection for the Greenwood Cliff? Did you assign folks that were on there?
I only assigned Joe as the chairperson, and then Joe chose who he thought he needed on that task force.
All right. And this was 2011.
Yes.
2011. All right. What, if you look back on your year as president, what was one of the biggest challenges? And it may have been saying no to the money, but a lot of it is, we have all these challenges within the Great Recession. What was one of the biggest challenges you had to face that you overcame, and how'd you do it?
I think some of the biggest challenges were staff cutbacks. That's always hard to do. Telling people they're not going to get an increase this year, cutting. I mean, like, I'm surprised people here still like me. Cutting the IRA matches, all those things. I mean, I bought an inversion table so I could go home and hang upside down and get the blood flow into my brain. It was.
I have an inversion table too. For you, I think the aspirin at the end of a headache that any 401k match could bring you is the fact that they've got a really nice office now. So that's for sure. I think when we look back, we're all appreciative of the leadership there in 2011. So you're president, and then after you're president, some presidents kind of they go back and concentrate on their practice in the real estate business. You keep going and are continuing as like a director for NCR, and now you are treasurer of NCR. What's that been like? How has that been?
It's been different.
Okay.
It's been different. I think in some ways this association is much more complex than NCR is.
Okay.
But it's, I've always enjoyed the bigger picture. Always enjoyed seeing what's going on in the horizon. So NCR gives me a little bit more of that, and I just feel like, don't ever stop unless you have to.
Nice. And so don't ever stop unless you have to brings us to your running unopposed again for a second term.
They're scared of me.
So what's the term? Is it 2 years?
Yeah, it's 2 years, and you're only allowed one second term.
Okay. All right. So you're back in the saddle again. What does it mean, do you think, to our local audit, budget, and finance committee when they have your expertise come in the room, just at a committee level, to really look at the numbers specifically? What do you think you bring to the table there?
I think there's so much talent on that committee already. The best thing that I bring to the table there is history.
Yeah. All right.
I think the best thing that I bring is maybe an understanding of the organization and the history of the organization that newer members on that committee just don't have yet.
Do you think you set the high standard, the high bar?
I try to.
Good. So when you look back, what is one of your favorite committees to be on? Favorite times to be on a board? When you look back, is it the executive committee with some of those friendships and memories that you made there? Is it certain boards that
it
really
was
stick
the
out?
executive committee,
All right.
Lynn Kessie and Dot and Donna and me and Gay.
Okay.
And we used to have crazy times. We got to, can't remember what city it was, because from week to week you don't know what city you're in when you're on the executive committee. And the car was too small that came to pick us up at the airport.
Oh.
So I rode for 2 hours on Dot's lap.
Nice. Nice. So when we look back to an all-female executive committee, sometimes that type of diversity can get lost in the shuffle. We think a lot about diversity when it comes to race and ethnicity, but there was a time in real estate when it was just male dominated. It was difficult for women to get involved in real estate. Difficult for women sometimes to get involved in business, in any level of business or type of business. Did you recognize? Did you recognize the significance of an all-female leadership at the time?
Yes, when we sat in the boardroom at the old building, I used to look at the pictures on the wall, and this wall and that wall and part of this wall were all men with a few women interspersed. And then all of a sudden, we got more female faces, and now we've got a pretty good balance.
What's something that's, when we look ahead, what's something that you want current realtors to be mindful of as we kind of enter into the next few years of our, we're hopefully coming out of the pandemic. If you could guide us and direct us to be mindful of something, what would it be?
Let me think a minute. I don't want people to lose the ability to connect with each other.
All right.
I don't think over the years the actual basic activities of real estate have changed, but the way we communicate has changed. So, our means of communication have changed. So where we used to run to someone's house to get an offer signed, we have dot loop, we have e-sign, we have all that ability to not ever connect with another person. But I still think the basic thing is getting face-to-face with people who want to buy, sell, lease real property. And it's still a relationship business.
So when you were in leadership back at least on the executive level, the use of market stats was introduced, and particularly in a time, i.e. the Great Recession, where there's a lot of fear and uncertainty, how did you capitalize on market stats and communicate that to the realtors and the public to kind of help people assuage some of their fears with what was going on in the market?
Well, when we first looked at SAMs, we were kind of like, whoa, what is this and what can it do for us? And then when we decided to invest in it, I think it was a great, great tool for realtors to have. And for quite a while, people didn't know it existed. But once they got used to it, and we showed them what they could do, I think the market stats, because real estate is still local, and it's hyper-local now. And so being able to dig down deep into those stats, I think, is one of the best things someone can do. You got to know your market.
Yeah.
You got to know your market. You got to know everything about it.
And so since you yourself acknowledge that not everybody really knows what it is, what is SAM?
Statistical Analysis Module.
Yes, and it is.
Are you surprised I knew that?
I am not. I am not, because you helped bring it into the fold. When you log on to MLS now, knowing with the contributions that you help bring about in your leadership, and you see all the tools that we have now, do you look at it as, we've got so many tools, you need to try to know as many as possible, or do you look at it as, hey, there's a variety for each realtor to use that they feel most comfortable with, and you don't have to feel the pressure to know everything. You just got to know what works best for you. Is there one way or the other? Is there a give or take, or is it just who the specific practitioner is?
It's who the practitioner is. I teach a class on strengths and skills, and I tell people, forget about what you can't do. You hire somebody. Just forget about what you can't do, and forget about what you don't like to do. So find out what works for you. The secret of this business is it's not rocket science. It's not rocket science, and people make it harder than it needs to be. So find out what works for you, do it consistently, and don't get yourself all bogged down about buying this and buying that and knowing this and knowing that. Focus.
Now, how long, you're teaching at the Canopy Real Estate Institute, how long have you been teaching there a little bit?
Probably 3 years.
So what are some of the lessons that you think most resonate with the students that are coming into your class? By the way, I've taken one of your classes. I took one of your classes while I was on vacation, and it was good. So what do you think resonates, I think, with the students? What do you kind of get out of it when you're doing your thing?
It depends on what I'm teaching. If I'm teaching CE, different things are going to resonate with the continuing education student, that's going to resonate with the post-licensing student, that's going to resonate with the pre-licensing student. So it depends on the class. I would say CE, you get a few where something resonates, but a lot of people are there just because they need to do their 4 hours. And
we had one where you did case studies. You're really good at doing the case studies. And what can happen is in those case studies is that I really admire about your teaching style is that you get the class to participate, one person kind of makes an understanding of what, or states what they understand, and then another person can build on that, and it just continues to flow, so that you get almost everyone contributing to the education of the class. And so you build, now you help corral it if it goes off to one side or the other, but you kind of use the students to build on their knowledge and expertise in the business as practitioners, and it really makes for a more informational, educational experience.
A lot of them have more expertise than I do, so.
And you're
great.
smart enough to recognize that and just let it happen. That was the one key takeaway I had from your class, is that the amount of participation that you afforded us and how we could talk amongst each other. It's very rare that realtors can talk about differences of opinion without things being hidden, because you want to maybe make sure you don't give away too much of your client's information, and you want to strategize. But here it was just very open and educational.
Well,
so,
thank you.
Hey, so what do you look back on over the course of your career that you're super proud of?
I think, I was a practitioner for several years, but most of my career I've been a broker in charge.
Okay.
And I think what I'm most proud of is when I see when I look out into the big wide world and I see all the people that I've coached and trained who have become successful. I think that's what I'm most proud of.
All right, and they're still out doing it today?
They're still out doing it today.
All right. So you, in addition to teaching at Canopy Real Estate Institute, you're a BIC and a sales lead, and you do coaching. So you have helped people over the years maximize their abilities, depending on their approach. Make a perfect realtor. Is there a perfect realtor? I mean, what are the characteristics that, what makes a great realtor in your opinion?
Well, when people first come in and they interview and they say they want to get in the real estate business, and they start in about, oh, I love people, oh, I love houses. I'm like, no, no. We all love people, we all love houses. Tell me something else, tell me. And so what I look for, basically, is first and foremost integrity. Someone that I know that I can send out into the world who is going to do the right thing. The second thing that I look for, and maybe it doesn't appear immediately, but I want someone who is able to let go of the outcome. I want someone who can talk to a potential person, potential client, and not be so concerned sitting at that listing table or doing the buyer consultation, so concerned about the possible commission than they are about the client. Like, if I get this, it's going to be $1 million deal, so I'm going to do my best. I want someone who is willing to go out there and educate the client and make that client the best informed client by the time they finish speaking to them, and then walk away. And if they get the business, they get the business, which they usually will when they take that attitude. And if they don't, they just move on. That's what I'm looking for. Someone who can focus, someone who understands that what you do today might not come to fruition. It's like dropping that pebble in the pond and the ripples go out. And someone who can be consistent, reliable, on time. That's my perfect real estate agent.